Peace. Long life. Live long and prosper, etc., etc. Okay. Now, I did two posts, and I didn't think the first one got through, so I did the second one really short. Said I'd just do a video here. Well, the idea of the video was to talk about valves and valve seats and valve heads, and you take a cylinder head to a shop, and what's going to happen. All right? Now, I'll try and make it brief as possible, but this is going to be ugly no matter how you do it. I've made some phone calls over the last year, and especially on the John Deere cylinder head. They were talking anywhere prices between $350 and $550 just for the machine work. Now, the John Deere 2-cylinder, the one I'm currently finishing up now, is just trying to get parts to make a WD-40 cylinder head work. I'm finding out that if I want valve rotators for it, I'm going to have to find some way to buy something aftermarket for the bugger. So $30-some a piece, and I need 4 total. Well, then I went and did a serial number break check. Well, an older serial number tractor had the same retainer as the intake valves, because it takes the same locks and has the same tip on the valve that the intake valves do. It's just a different head. So that one I'm monkeying around with. However, the end exhaust ports were rotted off, like 16th on one side and an 1/8 on the other. So you're talking something pretty ugly here that I had to do a lot of work on. And I kept coming up with these astronomical numbers. So the only thing that helps in this case is it's my brother-in-law's tractor. I think. I'm not sure at this point in time because his life's... He's put his own life in a roller coaster. So I don't know how the final thing is going to come out. Now I'm going to put the wrong reading glasses on specifically because they're smaller and a little cleaner. My other glasses are safety frame. And, well, let's just say the lenses... They are no longer what you would call unscratched. They get a lot of work. So, these were the numbers that I have for me, but I pulled out the Allis-Chalmers INT manual. So I went by the flat rate manual. There. Can you see it better that way? And I started adding up the times. And I'm getting the basic repair time here, just for what Allis-Chalmers or INT had for guides, seats, and your standard valve job with the head off, because they did have a listing for that, we're talking in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 hours worth of work. What have I got here? 3, 4, 6 hours. Yeah, I wrote down 8 for some reason here. Let me change that. That was because I was thinking on some other line. So we'll go with 6 hours. Now, in a standard shop, that would mean your basic valve guide, replacing guides, and in this case, 4 seats, everything else in decent shape. 6 hours in your average shop out here anymore? $900. 1.5 times. Okay? You're talking $150 an hour for a lot of these shops. And we're not talking CNC machines either. We're talking basic, solid, good machines, as accurate as CNC, but they're manually operated. Good machines. If you go to Jamsey online, you'll see their CERTI, and their TCM25 goes way back, and that machine has been out of circulation for, 20 years now, I guess. Peterson machine, Kansas Instruments. I had one for a short time till the salesman got me screwed, and I was able to get out of the lease and send it back. It was a good working machine, but it wasn't anything impressive either. So, what have we got? I use New Way valve equipment, front to back in general, but for valve refacing, if I have to do the tips of the valves too, like these heavier ones on the tractors, I have an old Black & Decker machine that does the tip of the valve very well. Now, the New Way can do it, but it doesn't put a chamfer on it. Okay? So the tip of the valve, where your valve locks are, when the tip of the valve comes out, you need to grind this surface. And then you need to put a nice little light chamfer around the outside of it. So the rocker arm has a place that's direct to hit, that's closest to the center. That's what they're looking for. So, valve job off the head, they're off the tractor, walk it into, it even says walk it into the shop essentially. 3 hours. It was like 2 point something, rounded off. Guides, no, you figure 8 guides. If everything goes well, which on this head it did not, it's an hour. Yeah, sometimes you can pop them all out. One John Deere head, I took the air hammer, drove them out, and tapped them, started them back in, and finished them with the air hammer. It's beautiful. The whole thing, 4 guides are done in 10-15 minutes. With the Alice Charmers, that took me over an hour to get them out. So that varies. Let's just say guides are an hour on average. The seat replacement, they gave a time factor for that. You got to take the old ones out, clean it up, and put the new ones in. That's not cutting the seats. They actually put enough time for 2 hours on that. Yeah. I don't know why, but they did. So even that, if you cut all that down a little bit, you end up with 5 hours worth of work at $150 an hour. $750. So how do you come to that? Well, I didn't. It's not written on here that way because all my numbers are off now with that 6 hours instead of 8. What's 150? You're talking 6 hours, correct? 6 times 150. Split it up. You know there's 100 there. 600. Now you got 50 left over. 6 times that. So, anyway, is that what I'm thinking? Yeah. What, 4 hours? No, it'd be a lot more than that, wouldn't it? I'm not thinking correctly here. All right, 6 hours times 150. $900. Yeah, I got my 50s all mixed up. So you're talking just in the basic valve job, common labor on your cylinder head, $900 at their rates. Now I should be charging more, and eventually here, probably in another few months when I get the shop straightened around, I'll be at $75 an hour, so it'll be half of theirs. But let's say it's $100, 6 hours, $600. You've done basic work. Now this is just a valve job. You had a running tractor. There's no other complaints to it. You pull it off, clean it up. You don't see cracks. So you go ahead with it. Now I had a tractor that I did that years ago. I think right out of college, Kaiser Wilcox up in Bergen, New York. Up on, I think it's what? Northeast of Batavia, about 20 miles. Between Rochester and Batavia in the middle of nowhere, the Bergen swamps. And we did a valve job on a Ford head. And what we ended up doing is I had to peen a crack shut because I overheated it so many times. I cracked the head across one of the valve cover rims edges. And I peened it, and we put some stop leak in it. Tractor ran beautiful. They said, it's leaking a head gasket. Well, okay, so I did a valve job, put it back on. Yeah, so I got familiar with crack repair from that point on. So there you are. That's for the basics. $600 for an inexpensive, cheap backwoods shop like mine, or $900 for the guys with the big fancy machines. They're gonna charge for it. They have to. Now, that's per hour charge. There's a lot of these guys that'll charge piecework just because it came in that way. And it's easier for them to run through. What procedures did you have done? They write down the procedures. They have a basic charge. So that $900, let's say it gets cut back to, like I was originally thinking, $750. You're still talking $750 just for labor. You haven't accounted for the valve train kit that you pick up for $150. It's $130 plus shipping, so you're talking $150 or so. That's from 2 sites I looked up, and those 2 sites were $10 to $20 more expensive when I bought these a year ago. So now let's just say we're at my prices coming. We'll say it's $600, the cheap end. All right, now this one took extra cleaning, and because it was rusted, I had to hand clean that thing out, magnaflux it, and pressure test it. Well, that was another 3 hours. So what's that at? Another $300 on the thing. You say, how in the world? No, that hand cleaning. I had to literally scrape rust out of there. Well, your cleaning equipment. Told you, I'm basic. And even theirs, they'd have to bake it. And even then, because it's rust, you're not getting up there to massive temperatures to melt that stuff out of there. You're talking 400 or 500 degrees. 350 is quite common. Just enough to burn the paint and the other crap out of there. Rust like this, you hand work it. Because some of it was heavy scale. Yeah, I used the needle scaler on this thing for half an hour to an hour. So I've got 3 hours in cleaning, magnaflexing, and pressure testing. So what's that? Even at my prices, that's another $150. At their prices, that's another $300. If we go by the $100 an hour. So now what are you up to? You're at $10.50 to have this thing fully done, front to back, because it's an antique. You've got to check it. You got it from a junkyard. You have to check it. I went online, and I can't remember which site it was. Yesterday's Tractor or Steiner, one of them, had a reman head. By the time you got through with the price for the reman head coming in, the head alone was $700. They cleaned it, visually inspected it. They put guides in it and seats if it needed it. But the final valve job had to be done. So you had to go through it again. And the way they had the description, it was checked. It might have been magnafluxed. I don't think it was pressure tested. I'd have to go back and look it over, but still, say it was magnafluxed, pressure tested. Seats had a preliminary cut to them, but the guides were put in it. That's it. It's a naked head otherwise. So if you take a look at it and decide it needs intake valves too, or valve seats too, now they have to be installed, not replaced, installed. Yeah, this WD head had seats in the exhaust. I was able to pop them out, clean it up, and put another set in there. And because of the rust, there was just enough ridge to hold that valve seat in there. Just. Yeah, if you don't have a full rim to hold the valve seat in there, one side's going to go down and you're going to burn a valve. And you have to tell them, well, run it while you can, because later on you're going to have to do something. You'll say, well, then weld it. Now you're getting into a spot where, no. I can. In the future, I'll be able to do that. That's my plan. I have a spray welder and the material to do it, and it's below the valve seat. So there's many possibilities that I'd be able to spray weld this, hand grind it back out, and remachine it to work. But that's the kind of stuff you don't do if another head's available for about $350, $400. They have extra shipping charges now. Extra charges before you get to your checkout. And a $25 core charge. So a $350 head suddenly is over $400, $425. And what do you got? A used, naked head. Get my drift? So, the WD Alice Chalmers isn't that popular a tractor to go out there and find like you would a 8N Ford, 9N Ford, or excuse me, another Red Tiger. So let's play that game. You bought the used head. You got, let's just say you're on the low side. You got 400 in it. Now, what do you have? On the cheap side, you have 400 in it, 600 in labor, another 200 in parts. So what have you got? That's right. You have $1,200 to $1,300 without tax or other charges. And that's in a basic 4-cylinder WD Alice Chalmers cylinder head. Now the John Deere, believe it or not, they were telling me numbers anywhere between $350 and $450, $500 for the John Deere 40 head, which is similar to the M's and the MTs and the 420s and others, but there's some differences depending on serial number break. And they were talking prices not too far off of this. So, well, yeah, because you got to set up. Once you're set up, everything else goes easy. There's some truth to that. So it'd only be a few bucks more or a few bucks less one way or the other, but your John Deere 2-cylinder head is still going to be probably around $300 used, cleaned and visually inspected. That's it. No magnaflux, no pressure test. So, and I had another one that I got from McFadden's one time that the head was good, but by the time I got through cleaning the thing up and blasting it, I found a whole row of pins, tapered pins, and I think they were cast iron pins. somebody froze the thing, and it was originally cracked. And I said, well, never crack there again. It's in beautiful shape. Clean it up and sell it as a takeoff. And he said, nope, nope, nope. I want them perfect. I said, you can't get any better than that. He says, I know, and I'm running out of heads, but I don't trust it. Give him a warranty. Tell him it's been repaired, it's been tested, and the thing's ready to go. If there's a problem, you cover it for 30 days or something. Nope, don't want to get involved in that. No, I didn't blame him for that. There's a lot of stuff that Jimmy McFadden did that got people angry, and at the same time, when you start getting into the business end of things, you understand that he wants a clean cut. He'd rather either break even or lose a little money rather than stand for something later on that may or may not go bad. It's just like this recoups some of his cost of getting the part there, and on the rest of the tractor, he'll make up his profit. He's done that in the past. Today, I don't think so. But still, I'd recommend if you had to go for parts, he'd be one of the first places I'd tell you to call. McFadden and Sons up in Sharon Springs, Sharon Hill, New York, Route 20. He's got to have a mess of a yard by now. If he could get the next door house away from Jeffrey Ullman, and then get the house down below that used to be mine in the old church. Wow. Yeah, I had dreams for that old church opening the thing up, but somebody else actually did that, young preacher. But I got a feeling that church is long gone. So anyway, that's what we're looking at there. Why your costs are so high. Now, why are they? Well, if I go to buy cutters, my valve seat cutter is a simple one. It was originally designed to be used on the road. Excuse me. I've actually improved, and I'm still nursing a bad cold. Well, not a horrible cold, just miserable. So, what was I going on about anyway? Well, anyway, the machine work that we're doing here and your parts. Now, most of these parts are Chinese. Let me tell you another story. Go to Jamsey Online. Or, Steve doesn't cover it so much anymore. He did if you go back a year or two ago. Steve Morris will show you that almost every valve that comes through, he's talking performance valves, and he has a big one on Brodix and some of the other heads that come through where everything is remachined. All of it. Everything. There's 3 reasons for it. One of them is it was cheaply done in the first place. 2 is maybe they did the machining and the heat treat caused a problem, and maybe the heat treat it heated, cooled, and shrunk, and even when they got through that, it still hadn't settled. And then the 3rd one is that aluminum has a problem with settling. So if it's not stored in a shelf, aluminum will settle after a year, so 2, 3. Aluminum changes unless it's bolted to another solid object. They call it a semi-fluid. That's why they put silicon and some other materials in there with it to mix it. What do they put in there? Copper and some other stuff that they mix in with a tin to give it something in the structure, because apparently nothing actually, it's not like high carbon and alloy steels that mix and change the property of the steel. These things don't mix. They're admixture with it, and they create a substrate in there, kind of like throwing sand or stones into concrete. You don't change the concrete itself, but you're adding other materials in it so the concrete acts differently. Aluminum has that problem. You say, well, they got metals and they can. I know there are, but still, when you call for Silverlight pistons and Keith Blacks, hyper-eutectics they call them, what it meant was eutectic is a perfect mix, like a balance of silica into the aluminum and whatever other admixtures or alloys they put in there. Hyper-eutectic was extra silica, and it acted like a heat dam. Problem was, you had to have huge ring end gaps in some cases. So when you were going by the old formula of 4 thousandths per inch, so in a 4-inch bore you had 16 thousandths was your minimum ring end gap. Yeah, now you're running, if you're racing, 25s, 30s. Some of them told me that when they were running nitrous drags on the small blocks, they had to actually, nitrous blown and all of that, they were running 60 thousandths ring end gap. Excuse me, to keep the top ring from butting up. 60 thousandths. You know what that is? That's a full 16th of an inch. Almost. A 16th of an inch is 62.5, 0.0625. How do I know that? Because an 1/8 inch is 0.125. Cut it in half. So there's a lot that goes into these things. Now, when you're boring the engine, that your clearances and all the stuff adds up to being a similar thing to here where they have the machines to do this. Some guys picked on me before and saying, well, you got CNC machines to do it. No, I'm not spending $1 million in a shop. What got me into this in the first place was I went over the hill and there was I can't remember their name, Cruz or something over in Nelliston, New York, over by Fort Plain in Nelliston. They were across the river. I think it was Nelliston there. No, they were on the upper side of the river. Yeah, but whatever. They were in that area. And they were doing some machine work. It was basically a junkyard, and they were hauling stuff left and right and clearing places out. That's where his big money was in a machine shop, was to fix machines up and sell them. Cylinder heads, blocks, and such. And what I found was that I got several heads back, like 2 or 3 in a row, that as it turned over. I was like, how in the world can do that? Well, then I'm talking with the one son there, and they hadn't replaced the cutters, their valve seat cutters. They used the New Way system too, but they hand cut all the valve seats. And with a T-handle, I can tell you, you'll be off. I had a 9N I did. And when I got through the 9N, I had to go back and do it all over again because when I pushed down on the T-handle, I cut one side heavier than the other without even realizing it, and none of the valves seated. So I had to start all over again. When I got done, it ran beautiful. And that's what they were doing in their shop with dull and with T-handles. Oh. I had the valve drivers in the rebuilder's kit, complete rebuilder's kit. Huge cutter heads, and I actually used a couple of them. John Deere D's and R's and such. So I think a couple of 60s. So a lot of interesting things that I did with the New Way setup. I didn't have the New Way valve facer. What they call it, VDR 1000 or something there. I do now. I got it just because. And the one I have was in a, what do they call, vocational shop, auto shop out in Michigan. I ended up with that off of eBay. It's pretty worn out. But it works pretty good. I tightened everything up, got it working, and makes a nice valve seat. And no, I don't have everything to check the seat run out, check the valve face run out and all that. However, when I get through cutting the valve face, I use the easy turn tool now. Hold it with one hand. It has spring pressure. You can change how hard you cut the seat, how much material you take, if any. And you turn it with a little knob. Excuse me. It's consistent. Works very well. But one of the things I found out is when you get through machining your valve face, you can take it and pound it against the seat with one slap. Pick the valve up and take a look. And you'll see a nice line. And you can judge your run out by how that line looks on the valve. How well you cut the seat. Alloy seats sometimes leave little burrs there, so you have to be careful when you're finishing it. You take your hand and finish the seat. Cut it with the overcut by hand and then turn it to the seat angle and give it a little spin and then put the valve and pop. One pop, maybe two, pull the thing up, and then you'll see a nice line all the way around. Almost every time. So as far as accuracy, I'm not worried about any of it, but the one thing it does is it takes more time. Valve pocket seat cutter takes a lot more time to set up. My whole rig cost $2,000 when I got to put valve seats in the head, in a raw head that doesn't have seats. Works beautiful, but it takes setup. And sometimes it takes setup after setup, depending on the different holes and mounting places in the head. But once your basic unit is set up, it's pretty easy from that point. You say, well, the valves aren't all in identical depths. Nope, they're not. You can be 20, 30 thousandths off on most engines and not have a problem. Now, the diesels, new diesels, no, that's a problem. Old power cell diesels, pre-combustion chambers, doesn't matter. Seriously, it does not matter, but you don't want to go butchering it either. You want a nice, clean valve seat. So I've had old Olivers that I put valve seats in and gave them, some of them were slightly cracked. Well, as long as it didn't go through the water, we left them alone. Bore it out and put the valve seat in for at least 5 thousandths press fit. Problem solved, engine ran great. So those are some things to think about. Why didn't we fix the crack? Well, because you have to go through the water jacket. Now you're in the water jacket. So if it isn't leaking, we tend to leave them alone, maybe peen them shut. Leave it alone. And on the old diesels, they didn't care. So those are things that take extra time in my world. And that's what I want to work in, is antique. But still, as we go through this, you're talking $800 to $1,000 for John Deere 40 MMT heads, 420s, 430s, not a 435. And Alice Chalmers, D10s on up. Now, the beauty of the system that I have is that if you have an L-head flathead engine, I can put your valve seats in. That's what it's designed for, is that. And regular heads. Does a great job. It's portable. And that's why I stayed with the New Way system. I plan on working on that. And being in a variety of stuff in a small shop, I put it away in the toolbox, slide it back on the shelf when I'm done, and then the bench becomes space for any other work I need to do. So, and it stays clean, out of the way. So, but I got to figure out my valve guides. That's my biggest problem now. You pull out a fistful and they're no longer marked because they're so old. All right, so what did I do over here? I didn't price it, but I gave you the basic prices on that. Your standard valve, to go back to what we were originally talking about, standard valve job you're going to have with extra cleaning involved, magnaflux and pressure testing. If you're on the shopper, you're talking 9 hours there. $900 is your base price. $900. And you start adding in. Now I put in 4 valve seats, $20. That's just for the valve seats. I didn't put anything in here. Oh yeah, I did. Putting seats in 2 hours. So that should cover most of the seats. It takes time to get this stuff right, because you're not just cutting a pocket. And especially if you want to cut it at a particular depth, my unit can still do it, but I have to do the measuring to make sure of that. So right now, my system's designed to put a seat in there, drop a collar on the seat, and the thickness of the seat, the depth of the seat, is what the stop collar is set for. It works. It's very accurate. In fact, if you go watch JMZ online, he'll set his SERDI up the exact same way. Put the seat in there on the stop, bring the stop down, tighten it. So in the new ones, yeah, when you start talking CNC, now you're putting in dimensions. Doesn't need a stop. The probe goes down and finds out where it is, and it's going to go so far from this surface. Done. Or screwed up. So I'm quite happy with my system. I've got pictures, may have them on here, but if you go to Facebook, Seth Deb or Pops Howard, either one of them, I think I have the system all set up, and in one of them I have a video of the system working, cutting. And sooner or later I'll have to get seat cutters for that. How accurate is it actually? It's so accurate that I got a John Deere that you couldn't tell that there was seats in it. They'd been in there for so many years. And I ordered the John Deere seats, and I went to cut the intake out, and it stopped. Completely stopped. Now I checked the valve guides, cleaned them all up, and got them set. Put the pilot in, and the cutter uses the pilot plus a great big huge hunk of iron to hold the top in alignment. And it went down through and stopped cutting. And I said, what was going on here? I wasn't quite to the bottom. I looked and looked. I spinned a little below the stop collar is the spacer collar that it hits on, and it was still loose. So I pulled the system up. It isn't going any farther. Something's wrong. There's a little thin sliver of foil of the old seat in there. And when I got past the chamfer, it stopped. The cutter hit it, and it just spun on that little piece. Pulled it out and took a look. And you could see where my cutter had just touched the sidewalls here and there, going on down through. Just touched it. And the rest was black from carbon in the cast and carbon in the combustion chamber. I cut the original seat out for a perfect pocket on the entire head. 6 cylinders all the way through. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. Excuse me. So anyway, that's something else for you folks to, just think about for a while. The costs and things that happen with these cylinder heads. Valve guides quite often are only about 2,000 clearance, or I should say interference fit, anywhere between 1 and 3. They have to have interference fit to stay put. Some of them rot themselves into place, either from the carbon, the head getting overheated and super shrinking, however it is, like that Alice Chalmers. They weren't rusted in there because the new ones went in almost as hard. So you go to drive the valve guides out, you need to start from the top in most cases. Some have shoulders, you start from the bottom. But without the shoulder, you drive it through from the top, because down at the bottom is where the largest carbon deposits and the most welding is possible to occur. You break it loose there, the rest of the guide's good, you're good to go. Excuse me. Those are things we have to deal with. So, if there's valve seats in the head, then we have to go through and check to be sure they're tight. I've had some of them where I start cutting and the valve seat starts spinning. Okay, and I have a decision. Do you put it on an oversized seat, or is it in bad enough shape and the customer cheap enough, doesn't care, isn't going to do anything more than pull a wagon or two and maybe rake some hay, peen the thing in there. Finish cutting your seat. As soon as you peen it, everything changes, yes. Cutting the seat fixes the problem. It's ugly. But if they don't have a lot of money and no need, peen the seat in. And a lot of them used to do that with the cracked heads on the Olivers and Alice Chalmers and such with the power cell engines case. They'd stake them. One guy said he'd only stake it in 3 places. Only 3? He says, yeah, the seat's already in there tight enough. You're just staking it to hold it tighter. Okay. It sounded weird, but he says, yeah, do it all the time. He did a head for me, and there was 3 stakes. It worked. So that was Chuck Habrick, probably long gone by now. Habrick's machine up in Amsterdam, New York. Okay, so there we are. Now the addition that I had on here for labor, welding and resurfacing. I had to weld up those end ports so that manifold would even work. Well, that's an extra service that I'm practicing with on this head. So he's getting it dirt cheap. So I can set things up and learn how to do it. I found a nickel rod that would only need 200 degrees preheat, 2 to 250. Perfect. Took a side burner off an old barbecue grill, stuck it underneath a rack in the head, and put it inside an old fuel tank, so at least it was heated in a container. Got it to 200 degrees. And if you start the rod on another material and get all the sputtering done, get a nice smooth bead, immediately go up and hit the cast iron head, and it will run a bead that will blow your mind. I got it off of eBay, or Amazon, I should say. I hope I can find the rod again if I ever need it. Unfortunately, I got about 8 or 10 sticks left, so it isn't going to matter. But those are the things that I'm trying to pinning. That's easy. Well, I say it's easy. The process is long, drawn out, expensive. But if that's all you got, go to Jamsey online. They had a Ford 172 head that they had a slight debate. They went and got another head they found in good condition with no cracks. But this thing had like 6 cracks in it, 5 or 6. Perfectly pinned. Perfect. I would have sat there and laughed and said, beautiful. Finish it up. One of them was through the seat. In perfect working order. Don't screw with it. Why? Every crack guy I've known of that I listened to online all said the same thing. Once it's cracked and pinned, it will never crack in that area again. It can't. If you superheat it, of course it is. But under normal running conditions, no. So, some of the pitting they did on a Detroit diesel head was cracked between the seats and down into the ports, the neighboring ports. What do? They put 2 pins in this way to intersect with each other and 1 down the middle. Didn't even pin the whole crack. That's right, because when they put these through here, that took care of the crack horizontally. And then this one made sure that vertically it was all done. And they say, put pressure on the crack. Yeah, you drilled a hole at the end of the crack and put pins in. And if they intersect it enough, they're going to fix the leak on their own. Then you put the 3rd one in to stop that. No, I don't think I'd go with that. I think I'd rather shallow pin and go all the way through and put metal in there. But he says that's how they used to fix the diesel heads. Put the valve seats right on top of the pins. Well, Debbie's got one of the dogs going. or the cat, probably. All right, we're coming up on 30. Nope, just past 35 minutes. If you've been with me this long, thank you very much. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe like everybody else says. Because YouTube says, hey, you're doing pretty good for the amount of stuff that you're putting up there. All right. So anyway, this is Pop signing off. And then I'll try and go through the videos and the shorts and such. You'll see some of the stuff that I've been working on. Like I say, go to my Facebook pages. I've been posting there pretty regular. So I'll do something similar to this on Facebook later, just not now. See ya.